Slavery in America began in 1619 when 20 slaves were brought to Jamestown by Dutch traders to help with the production of tobacco. Slavery spread throughout the colonies as a way to have cheap and plentiful labor. 7 million slaves were stolen from Africa and brought to America during the 18th century. Slaves were mostly onto tobacco, rice, and indigo plantations during colonial times. During the Revolutionary War, some colonists began to think of slavery as wrong. But after the war, when the Constitution was written, it became the law of the land. By the late 1700s, cotton became an important crop in America. Cotton was grown down south and sent over to England for the textile mills. The cotton gin was invented in 1793. This machine made it easier to remove seeds from cotton, which meant even more cotton could be grown. That meant more slaves would need to plant the fields. The African slave trade was outlawed in 1808. That meant slaves would no longer be stolen from Africa. This did not slow down slavery, because the slaves are already here, could be kept, and children born to them were also slaves. Slaves were not allowed to read or write. They could not leave their plantation, and they had to do everything their owners were telling them to do. If they did not, they could be punished by whipping or be sold off and separated from their families.
After the American Revolution, some northern states outlawed slavery. In 1840, most of the slaves who lived in the North were set free. People in the North wanted to make slavery illegal across all the United States. They were called abolitionists because they wanted to abolish slavery. The southern states did not like this. They thought that they needed slaves to work their land. In 1859, John Brown was a famous abolitionist who wanted to overthrow slavery by arming slaves with weapons he tried to take from a federal army at Harper's Ferry. He was caught and hung. Before he died by hanging, he handed a garden note that warned that the crime of slavery in the United States will start a war. John Brown turned out to be right. The United States went to war with itself over slavery in 1861.
The Underground Railroad wasn't a real railroad. It was a network of people, homes, and secret hideouts. The slaves from the South that used to escape the freedom in the North. The Underground Railroad ran from 1810 to the 1860s. It was at its peak before the Civil War during the 1850s. Traveling on the railroad was difficult and dangerous. Slaves had to travel by foot at night, trying to be quiet as possible and hoping not to be caught. They often used the North Star to guide them. Sometimes conductors, or people who were familiar with the route, would lead escaped slaves from one station to the next. Stations were usually 10 miles to 20 miles apart. It was illegal to help slaves escape. In southern states, the conductors could be put to death by hanging. One famous conductor, Harriet Tubman, escaped slave herself, who made 13 missions to rescue 70 family and friends from slavery. About 100,000 slaves escaped over the history of the railroad. It sounds like a lot, but in reality, it was a very small number. There were millions of slaves being held in bondage down south, but the South hated the idea of anyone helping slaves escape. It wanted stricter laws passed to stop it.
In February of 1861, several southern states decided to break away from the rest of the country. They created their own country. That country, called the Confederate States of America. This caused the Civil War. They did this because they wanted slavery to continue. They also wanted their own laws for the United States government to leave them alone. When Abraham Lincoln became president, that made southern states want to leave the Union. He did not support slavery. They wanted a strong federal government. They did not want that. But the first state to leave was South Carolina. They were followed by Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and Arkansas. The southern states created their own government with the president. The president was Jefferson Davis. They had a military, and Robert E. Lee was in charge. They printed their own money and passed their own laws. The capital city was Richmond, Virginia. The first shots of the war was fired from the South Carolina troops fired on Fort Sumter. The Union Army in the fort ended up surrendering, and the South took charge of the fort. The Confederate States of America lasted from 1861 to 1865. They lost the war and rejoined the United States of America.
Abraham Lincoln was born February 12, 1809, in Kentucky. He was our 16th president. Lincoln was self-taught. He had little formal education. He worked hard his whole life. He and his family moved to Illinois when he was 21 years old. He helped them get settled. He left to start a life of his own. Lincoln became very smart from all his reading. He got elected to the state legislature. He became a lawyer. Lincoln got married to Mary Todd. They had 4 children: Robert, William, Tad, and Eddie. In 1860, Lincoln was nominated to be the president. He won the election. He was only 40% of the vote. He was only 51 years old. When he took office in January, the South threatened to leave the Union. On April 12th, the Civil War officially began. It was a long and sad war between the states. There was a lot of fighting and deaths on both sides. On January 1st, 1862, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves that lived in the Confederacy. He later passed the 13th Amendment to end slavery for all time. 5 days after the war ended and the North had won, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. He died on April 15, 1865.
Robert E. Lee went to West Point Military Academy when he was 18 years old. He graduated near the top of his class. He joined the Army Corps of Engineers and built forts and bridges for the Army. He got married to Martha Curtis, who is Margaret Washington's granddaughter. They have 7 children. Lee fought in the Mexican-American War. General Scott said Lee was one of the best soldiers he ever saw. Lee became colonel and became well known for his ways in battle. Lee was also the soldier who led the takedown of John Brown's wing at the Federal Armory at Hofburg Ferry. John Brown wanted to start a revolt with slaves. Again, Lee was noticed for his actions in battle. When the Civil War started, Lee was offered command of the entire Union Army. He did not agree with slavery, but he could not fight against his home state of Virginia. He left the Army, but soon took command of the Confederate Army. He earned the nickname Gray Fox. Gray was the color of his uniform, and Fox because he was so smart and clever. He fought hard in the 7 Days Battle, the Battle of Antietam, the Battle of Vicksburg, the Battle of Gettysburg, the Battle of Cold Harbor, and the Battle of Appomattox. He fought well, but he was overwhelmed by the Union Army. In the end, he surrendered his army to General Grant in Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865. He could have been tried and hung as a traitor to the United States, but he was forgiven by President Lincoln. He worked as the president of a college until his death in 1870.
The Battle of Bull Run was the first major battle of the Civil War. It took place in Manassas, Virginia, which was just 30 miles from Washington, D.C. It was the first time Americans fought one another with two great armies on the battlefield. General McDowell led 30,000 Union troops against P.T. Beauregard's Confederate army of 20,000. The goal was to capture the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia. The North was certain they were going to win this battle and end the war quickly. This belief was so strong that men and women dressed up in fine clothing and drove their horse and carriages out to the battlefield with picnic baskets. They sat on the hills to watch the battle. In the beginning, the North did well and appeared to be winning. In the afternoon, the South rallied after General Jackson standing bravely and strong like a stone wall. This led him to being nicknamed Stonewall Jackson. Additional Southern troops arrived, and they soon overwhelmed the Union Army. The Union Army began to run. The Confederates chased them, and they chased the picnickers all the way back to Washington, D.C. The city of Washington, D.C. was in a complete panic. They were afraid that they were about to be invaded. That would not have been good, but the Confederates did not invade. Even though they ended up winning the battle, they too suffered many deaths that day. Both sides lost thousands of men. This Battle of Bull Run proved to both sides that it was not going to be an easy and quick war.
22,717 men died, were wounded or lost during the Battle of Antietam. The battle began on September 17, 1862, near Hofburg, Maryland. The North, under General George McClellan, attacked Robert E. Lee forces counterattack, and that battle went back and forth through a cornfield about the size of a football field. Over 8,000 men died in just 4 hours of fighting. The fighting then moved over to a sunken road, which was nicknamed Bloody Lane. This area was only about the size of 3 football fields. When the Union finally took this area, Confederate soldiers were dead, stacked 3 to 4 high. It was a battle that ended with no one really winning, so it was a draw. But President Lincoln claimed the victory and used it to announce he was freeing the slaves down south. Antietam still remains as the bloodiest single day in battle in the history of America.
The Battle of Gettysburg took place on July 1st through the 3rd in 1863 in a near town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This battle was one of the most important battles of the Civil War for the North. Robert E. Lee had invaded the North and was trying to defeat the United Army once and for all. However, the Union Army held him off and sent him retreating. This was a major turning point in the war. The battle took place over 3 days. On the first day, the armies were all coming together. The Confederates outnumbered the Union the first day and caused them to retreat through the town of Gettysburg to the south side of town. General Lee wanted his men to continue to attack and finish the Union troops. His men delayed, and the Union had the opportunity to dig in a set of defenses. The second day, the armies from both sides were in full force. There was fierce fighting throughout the day, with both sides taking heavy losses. The third day, General Lee decided to make an all-or-nothing attack. He felt that he could win the battle for the South. He sent General Pickett with 12,500 men on a direct charge at the heart of the Union. Pickett's men were defeated, with over half of them injured or killed. General Lee and the Confederate Army retreated.
Joshua Chamberlain was from Brewer, Maine, and was a college professor of modern languages. He was fluent in 10 different languages. When the Civil War broke out, Chamberlain enlisted and was made a colonel of the 20th Maine. He had no military background, but studied to learn about military tactics. It was at Gettysburg where Chamberlain saved the Union Army from defeat on the second day. Chamberlain and the 20th Maine were posted on Little Round Top, which was the far left flank of the Northern Army. After repeated attack by the Confederates, his men were down to their final bullets. They didn't have enough ammunition to defend another attack. Chamberlain ordered his men to fix bayonets and to charge down the hill, directly into the attacking Confederates. This counterattack surprised and overwhelmed the Southern troops and won the day. The following day, 20th Maine was moved to the center line of the Union Army, an area that's been quiet for 2 days. Unfortunately, there was a major attack called Pickett's Charge, which put Chamberlain and the 20th Maine on the line once more.
One of the most famous attacks of the Civil War was Pickett's Charge. This battle lasted 1 hour on July 3, 1863. General George Pickett began a massive attack against the Southern Union line on Cemetery Ridge on the third day of Gettysburg. General Robert E. Lee decided to attack the Union Army after 2 days of fighting, believing that he had weakened them. South began the attack with a huge artillery barrage. The North responded with their own cannon. Hundreds of cannon fire. This was the largest cannon barrage on Earth. The explosions and the ground shaking could be felt 40 miles away. When the North guns stopped, the South was fooled and believed that they were out of ammunition. Pickett and his men started marching across the field. They had to march almost a mile. After they got halfway, the North fired their guns again. The South continued the march under terrible fire. As they got closer, the Union Army started shooting with rifles. Although some Confederates reached the stone wall, they were stopped. The Confederates lost 50% of the men. This ended the Battle of Gettysburg, and the Confederates went back down south, never returned to north again for the rest of the war.
The siege of Vicksburg was a major victory for the Union during the Civil War. It happened the same day as the Union victory in Gettysburg that overshadowed it. But this battle was extremely important to the war effort because it gave the Union total control over the Mississippi River that strangled the South even more with much needed supplies from the West. The siege took much longer than a typical battle. It began in May and it lasted until July 4th, 1863. The city of Vicksburg was the last major port on the river held by the South. The North tried to attack the city directly and suffered great losses. General Grant decided to not to do that again. He surrounded the city and began to bombard it instead. The people of Vicksburg was very frightened by the constant bombing. They got caves in the ground and survived the bombs there. But they and the Confederate Army couldn't get anything in or out of the city. They began to starve. This is what Grant was waiting for. On July 4th, the Confederate soldiers told their general he needed to surrender so that they could eat. The South surrendered to Grant.
USS Grant was a general for the Union Army. He was a West Point graduate, where he was only an average student. He fought in the Mexican-American War, and then he served on a military post in the western U.S. He began drinking heavily to his resigning of the military. He tried many different jobs, but was not successful. When the Civil War began, he volunteered and was commander of the 21st Illinois Volunteer Regiment. He captured 2 forts and then won the Battle of Shiloh. He captured a very important southern city of Vicksburg. Then he won the Battle of Chattanooga, which gave control of Tennessee to the Union. This led to President Lincoln giving Grant the command of the entire Union Army. Grant fought against Robert E. Lee for more than a year in Virginia. He suffered a few losses to Robert E. Lee, but kept fighting and captured the important southern cities of Petersburg and Richmond, Virginia. Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy. Grant finally defeated Lee in the Confederate Army on April 9, 1865, which ended the Civil War. He was kind to Robert E. Lee and his soldiers, asking them to surrender their weapons and just to go home. Grant became 18th President of the United States of America just 4 years later.
General Sherman attacked Atlanta, Georgia, and took control of the city. This was a major setback to the South. This was their largest railroad hub and one of their largest cities. Now it was under Union control. After taking control of Atlanta, General Sherman decided to march across the state of Georgia to the sea. This became known as Sherman's March. Sherman ordered his men to live off the land, taking away from the southern people. They ate all the farm animals and crops, leaving nothing behind. Sherman also decided to hurt the South by destroying and burning everything in his path. His troops wiped out entire plantations, cotton gins, lumber mills, and businesses. They tore up rail lines, burned the ties, and melted the rails, and twisted the hot metal that they would be useless. Sherman destroyed everything in a 60-mile wide path that cut right through the state. He believed that the people of the South could feel the war, that they could stop supporting it. He was right. His march lasted 3 weeks and ended on December 21st, 1864. It was total war. It brought the Southern people to their knees.
On November 8th, 1864, Americans re-elected President Lincoln. He gave a famous speech, which he spoke Saturday of the war, in his wish to welcome the Southern states back to the reunion. He concluded his speech with the famous words, "With malice to none, with charity for all, with fairness in the light, as God gives us to see the light, let us finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow, and for his orphans, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with our nations."
On April 14, 1865, at 10 p.m., President Abraham Lincoln was watching a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. with his wife. The Civil War just ended. A conspiracy to assassinate him, his vice president and secretary of state, had been put into place by a Southern sympathizer named John Wilkes Booth. That night, Booth came into the presidential box and shot Lincoln in the back of his head once at close range. The gun Booth used to shoot Lincoln was a pocket pistol. Both then jumped from the presidential box to the stage and escaped on horse. Lincoln was brought to a boarding house across the street where he lingered all night long. At 7:22 a.m., Abraham Lincoln was pronounced dead. His Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, sadly remarked, "Now he belongs to the ages." As word spread, angry mobs gathered in several northern and occupied southern cities. That late afternoon, Booth and his co-conspirator, Harold, went towards the Potomac River. They planned to cross into Virginia and find a safe haven with sympathetic Southerners. Booth is slowed down by a broken leg, which either happened when jumping to the stage or falling off his horse. On April 22, 1865, Lincoln's funeral train departs from Washington, D.C. and traveled the country for 12 days while people mourn. On April 26, 1865, soldiers surround the Garrett barn. In the early morning hours, Harold surrenders, but Booth refuses. Troops light the barn on fire. Booth is shot in the neck, and he also lingers for hours and dies at sunrise. Booth's other conspirators are rounded up, and several are hung, and others given life in prison. On Easter Sunday, church services across the nation are packed with mourners dressed in black. Preachers compare the deaths of Lincoln and Jesus Christ. Lincoln's death leads to tremendous anger towards the South. The North is no longer in a mood to forgive or forget, which is what Lincoln wanted. The policies of Reconstruction and the aftermath of the assassination will have lasting consequences of the United States of America.
Reconstruction is what happened after the Civil War ended. It was supposed to rebuild the South, which was destroyed during the Civil War, but it didn't do a very good job at it. Reconstruction took place between 1865 and 1877, with President Andrew Johnson overseeing much of it. Johnson became president when President Lincoln was assassinated. He was assassinated by a Southerner named John Wilkes Booth. Lincoln being killed made the Union mad. They weren't very nice to the South. They divided the South into 5 military districts, which made life very tough for Southerners. During Reconstruction, blacks were given a voice in government for the first time in American history. They were elected to Southern state legislatures, even the U.S. Congress. This made many people in the South pretty upset and frustrated. They felt unfairly punished, and they did not react well to this. These changes came about too quickly and were enforced by the U.S. military. This led to the rise of organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan, which attacked and intimidated blacks across the entire South.
The Civil War tore the country apart and putting the country back together was really hard. The southern states were upset. They lost the war. The new laws would pass. They had to live by them. There was a huge change by them. The 13th Amendment outlawed slavery. The 14th Amendment made black people equal under the law. The 15th Amendment gave black people the right to vote. Federal troops occupied cities in the South until 1877. For 10 years after the war ended, these things did not help heal angry feelings. They would take a long time to heal the country. The most important lessons of the Civil War is learning to get along instead of fighting.